Hi, I've just watched Kait Willett's video on Schopenhauer and the collapse of sexual honor, and I want to respond to something it almost completely leaves out. The video is strong in several places. Schopenhauer did describe sexual honor as a utilitarian structure, a collective female strategy that secured long-term male commitment, paternity confidence, and provision. When that collective enforcement broke down, the consequences for commitment, children, trust, and restraint were real. The data she walks through on those points is largely correct, but there is a major omission. The video treats men primarily as people who pulled back once the terms of the deal became unreliable. That framing is incomplete. What actually happened for a large proportion of men is not free withdrawal. It is abandonment. Under the older structure, a much wider range of men could gain sexual and relational access through reliable provision and long-term investment. Looks mattered, of course, but they were not the only currency. Once sexual access became largely decoupled from that provision and weighted far more heavily toward immediate attractiveness and short-term status, the distribution of access changed sharply. A relatively small percentage of men now receive the large majority of opportunities. The rest experience steep declines, not because they decided relationships were no longer worth it, but because they were deselected. What looks like men backing away is, for many, the downstream result of sustained low or zero access. The consequences are measurable. Rising rates of sexlessness are concentrated among young men. Social withdrawal follows, and male suicide rates remain 3 to 4 times higher than female rates across most developed countries. These are not minor side effects. They are central features of the post-collapse market. The video's selective focus is itself revealing. Throughout the video, women are identified as the ones most affected or harmed more than 8 times. Children are framed as bearing the heaviest cost more than 4 times. Men, by contrast, are almost exclusively described as voluntarily pulling back. That imbalance is not accidental. It examines harms to women and children in detail, while treating male withdrawal mainly as a rational response rather than as the result of large-scale deselection. That selective attention functions as a form of cognitive dissonance reduction, acknowledging that a collective shift in female behavior produced large numbers of abandoned men, creates tension with narratives that present the same shift purely as liberation or progress. Minimizing those costs or reframing them as men's own failure protects the preferred story. Ironically, the omission demonstrates the depth of the abandonment. It is no longer only sexual or relational, it has become cultural and analytical. One group's losses are treated as structurally significant, the other group's losses are treated as secondary, invisible, or self-inflicted. Schopenhauer described a machine and correctly predicted what would break when it was taken apart. The video examines several of the load-bearing walls carefully. The human cost borne by the large majority of men who lost the older pathway to access is left almost entirely unexamined. That silence is part of the structure that remains. Thank you for watching. If you found this useful, there's more of this kind of analysis on the AI Gap website, aigap.com.au. We look at these patterns without the usual softening or selective blindness, because the costs only stay invisible when no one is willing to name them. The video we responded to today does important work in tracing what broke when the old structure of sexual honor collapsed. What it leaves out is the scale of abandonment experienced by the majority of men and the way that omission itself reveals how deep the abandonment has become. These are the kinds of truths we keep returning to, not because they are comfortable, but because they are real. I'm Samantha Masters.